The Portrait of Scott Taylor. Retired Private Scott Taylor is an Ottawa-based journalist and author, as well as the publisher of the Ottawa military magazine Esprit de Corps. According to Scott, he doesn't seem to have developed PTSD symptoms, despite being a prime candidate for them. Scott witnessed his fair share of trauma and violence while reporting on conflicts around the world. The most severe experience occurred in 2004 when he was kidnapped by radical Islamist group Ansar al-Islam while reporting on the U.S. military's invasion of Iraq. For 5 days, he was accused of being a spy, beaten, and repeatedly threatened with execution. Scott believes he dodged PTSD due to the fact he was able to, quote-unquote, drop the baggage, a term that refers to a person's ability to stop bottling up their potentially traumatic experiences by sharing their stories with their peers. We joined Scott at the Esprit de Corps offices in Ottawa. He explained that the public interest in his kidnapping and his giving continual interviews on the topic effectively allowed him to drop his baggage.
It was like I was doing it without even knowing it. So I was self-treating without knowing that was a treatment. And I can write, and I had the outlets, and I could, take that stuff and put it out to people.
Scott's role as a journalist also allowed him to avoid moral injury. Soldiers are required to follow orders, whether they agree with those orders or not. Reporters, however, must question them. For example, when it came to Canada's military mission in Afghanistan, Scott was able to be highly critical of his country's involvement in the war effort.
I think the frustration for a lot of our soldiers is they were in a war they couldn't win. People here put yellow ribbons on and drove around with bumper stickers but didn't have a clue what they were going through. That war would have been over for Canada in a minute if they said we needed to go to a lottery draft, that any man or woman could be drafted to go. It would have been over. Case closed. There's no case to be made for this. We're coming home.
The First and Second World Wars were a collective, nationwide military effort that actively involved everyday people and transformed society. But Scott says that the Afghanistan mission was a comparatively isolating experience for our professional military community.
We send these guys off. They come back 6 months later. Nothing's changed. The life and death stuff that they're seeing, abject poverty, they're in a whole different world. Then they come back to a world that didn't change. You've been out of this loop. Like, you feel like you've gone into orbit and come back. Our military is so small, and you've got 12,000 of the 60,000 personnel are married to another soldier. There's 6,000 couples, so 12,000 out of 60,000 have a military spouse. 40% of all those who enroll have one or both parents in the military. It's a tribe. All of that impact was on one tiny little cross-section of society. They go off, they come back, nothing's changed. They know the war's not a winner, and you got to go back in 6 months. And you go back, and then you go back a third time, and nothing's changed. Guys are still getting killed, there's nothing to win, there's nothing to happen, and you're asking these guys to go back. So that repetitive part, the lack of success, and the fact that they're changing but no one else around them is a pure fertile soil for people to question their own existence, to question everything about what's going on, because they believe in the military.
Scott has 2 suggestions for Canadians who want to help veterans with PTSD.
Education is always key. People need to educate themselves as to what PTSD is and why people would be suffering from it. And then the other one is to say, well, how do we prevent us going off to futile wars in the future?